My name is Thomas. I have a spooky tale about a werewolf incident I experienced, and I've always been a non-believer when it came to supernatural tales. I grew up in a small village in the middle of the Scottish countryside, where the elders told many legends and tales. The legend of the werewolf, however, was the most extensive of all, and I had never believed in it. It was the end of September. Autumn was in the air, with cold and windy nights. I had returned to the village to help my parents with the harvests, as I did every autumn. It was a full moon night, and the fields and woods were scattered silver in the light. I was on the porch, taking in the peace and quiet of the night, when I heard a sound that made me stop breathing, the long, sad sound of a howl coming from the far of the hills. I decided to go out and investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and an old shotgun that my father kept at home, more for safety reasons than anything else. I heard the sound, which seemed to come from the dense forest that surrounded our house. The farther I went into the woods, the more clearly the sound became unsettlingly human, but at the same time bestial. After walking for 30 minutes or so, I found a clearing where I was full of signs of struggle. Scratched trees, rags from torn clothes, and stains of fresh blood strewn across the ground. My heart raced. I kept going, driven by a combination of curiosity and almost fear. The sounds were starting to get closer as I walked. Suddenly I saw something move in the shadows. At first I told myself it was a wolf, but then I realized it was much bigger and much scarier. I could only see enough of the creature, if that was a creature at all, in the darkness beneath the trees, but its eyes glowed with a hot, devilish red light. Then I remembered the stories my grandfather used to tell me when I was a child about werewolves, unlucky men who turned into beasts in the moonlight. I always thought he was making it up to try to scare me, but in that forest I began to wonder if perhaps he really might know something. The beast leapt in front of me, showing its hideous shape, a hairy body, sharp claws, and a wide jaw. I fired, more by instinct than by any definite idea. The crack of the shot in the silence of the trees, and the thing receded, howling in hatred and pain. I ran back to the village, my heart hammering out of control. When I got home, my parents were at the door, anxious. I told them, and for the first time I saw fear shining in my father's eyes. He told me to lock everything up and not leave until the next morning. I didn't really sleep much. The howling continued, not so close, but always threatening. The next morning, the whole village was on alert. Everyone else nearby heard the howl, and one of them, an old family friend, was missing. We made a search party and went back into the forest. In the clearing from which I had seen the marks of struggle, we found a few others. A large pool of blood and traces of something being dragged toward a stream not far away. We followed the tracks and found our friend's body, mutilated in a way that was simply indescribable. It was at that moment that I realized we were fighting something very serious. This was not a fairy tale for children. It was a reality, and it was happening in our village. We decided to keep the discovery a secret, so as not to cause panic, but we increased security and guarded the area every night of the full moon. Over time, the howls became rarer until they stopped altogether. We never saw a trace of the animal again, but the memory of that event never goes away. From then on, I just can't laugh when someone mentions a werewolf. I know that there are things in the world that don't make sense, and that some of the legends, though impossible, are created from truth. I'm Ethan. I live in Waldheim, a small country town on the outskirts of Munich, Germany. Life has always been quiet, and the stories to scare have always been present. I never believed in things like that. But there was one time something incredibly scary happened. It was January, and snow covered the ground, the houses and everything. The full moon shone, reflecting off the snow and illuminating as if it were weaker sunlight. I had returned to my parents' house for Christmas. That night, I was at the house of a friend Hans, who lived a little further away from the village, in an area surrounded by forests and a lot of bush. While we were chatting away on the porch of the house, we heard a noise coming from the woods. We thought it was just some normal animal. Suddenly, we heard a long, high-pitched howl that made the blood run cold. Hans, who had always been more superstitious than I was, turned pale and told me it was a bad omen. We laughed about it, but there was something about the sound that bothered me. We decided to go out to investigate. We took flashlights and an old shotgun that Hans kept hanging on the wall. As we enter the forest, we begin to hear more noises and howls. We walked for a while until we found large, strange footprints in the snow. They looked like a wolf's, but they were much larger than any wolf footprint I had ever seen. We continued following the footprints, which led us to a small clearing. What we saw there left me speechless. There was blood in the snow and signs of a struggle. In the center of the clearing, a figure was hunched over, devouring something. The creature was huge, covered in thick, dark fur. His eyes shone with an evil light when he lifted his head and saw us. Hans fired his shotgun, the sound echoing through the forest, but the creature seemed only more enraged. He advanced towards us with impressive speed. We ran like we had never run before, the howls of the creature echoing behind us. We managed to get to Hans's house and lock the door in time, but the creature kept prowling outside, clawing at the walls and howling. We stayed up all night, listening to the horrible sounds outside. When morning finally came, the creature was gone. We cautiously went outside and saw that the snow around the house was all turned over, with deep claw marks on the wooden walls. We told the villagers what had happened, but few believed our story. Only the older ones seemed to take it seriously. Mr. Klaus called us and said that it was the work of a werewolf, a man who turned into a wolf under a full moon. The story seemed absurd, but after that night, we could no longer ignore what we saw. We began to prepare for the next full moon. We reinforced Hans's house and got more weapons and ammunition as collateral. When the night of the full moon came, we were ready. Again, we heard the howls and suddenly knocking on the door. This time we were not easy prey. We spent the whole night on vigil, watching for any suspicious movement outside. The creature tried to enter through the doors and windows several times, but we managed to keep it away thanks to advanced preparation. At dawn, we found trails disappearing in the forest. Since then, we haven't heard the howls anymore. The creature never returned until then, but the village was never the same. People became more afraid, and the stories of the elders gained more attention. I, who have always been skeptical, now know that there are things that even if you don't believe, it's better to stay away so you don't find out the truth. Some common stories have a kernel of truth that we can't ignore. I grew up in a rural village where horror stories were normal and often told by the elders, grandparents, and you all always knew some story or had experienced something supernatural in life. My name is Darley. The legend of the werewolf was a reality in that region. We were all afraid because we had already been through so much. The legends of the city said that on full moon nights, a hideous creature roamed the cornfields, farms, and woods, hunting down any living thing that crossed its path. Many laughed at the legend, but I always felt a shiver down my spine as I listened to the accounts as if a great sinister truth existed. On that particular night, I was on my way home after a long journey to the nearby town. The path through the forest was the shortest, but also the darkest and full of mysteries. I met my friend Henry on the way, who gave me a worried look. "Darley, are you really going to go through the woods tonight alone and unarmed?" "It'll be all right, Henry. They're just stories to scare kids. I need to get home quickly," I replied. I walked for about half an hour, when a strange sound get up from the bushes. I stopped, holding my breath. It might just be an animal, I thought. But the sound was different, a low, menacing growl that seemed to reverberate in the depths of my being. I kept walking, trying to ignore the growing fear. Suddenly, a shadow moved rapidly in front of me. My eyes widened and my heart raced. It was much bigger than any wolf I had ever seen in my life. The creature jumped out of the bushes. Its presence seemed pure evil. Oh my God. It was said werewolf without a doubt. He had demonic yellow eyes like a crocodile's, and his teeth were so big that they drew attention. I was paralyzed by that image in front of me. I couldn't move a muscle. The creature moved forward slowly, as if it was enjoying me out of fear. My mind was in turmoil. I remembered the old stories that said that the werewolf only attacked those who showed fear. I shut my eyes tight, trying to steady my racing heart. When I dared to peek again, the creature had drawn even nearer. Then a piercing scream shattered the silence of the night. The creature whipped around, ears pricked toward the sound. Seizing the moment, I bolted. Every stride felt like flying, desperate to escape the looming forest. As I reached the village's edge, I stole a glance backward. The creature hadn't pursued me. Gasping for breath, I stumbled into my home, bolting the door behind me. Sleep was impossible that night, my mind replaying the harrowing encounter. In the following days, I discovered I wasn't alone in seeing the creature. Panic gripped the village. Some set traps, others armed themselves. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. The creature was more cunning than any human. At a village meeting, everyone was discussing what to do. "We need to hunt this thing down," John exclaimed, one of the older farmers. "What if it's just a legend?" Sarah questioned, trying to remain calm. "I saw it with my own eyes." "That's not just some old tale. It's real, and it's dangerous." As time went on, the sightings dwindled, but the fear never left me. Even now, I avoid going out at night, especially when the moon is full. The story of the werewolf still circulates in our village, and I'm one of the few who can claim to have come face to face with the creature. Despite skeptics, I stand firm in what I know I saw. Somewhere out there in the darkness, the werewolf still lurks, waiting for the next full moon to hunt again. Here I am, willing to tell you a story that will make your hair stand on end, my friend. It happened at the end of the world, in a countryside lost among the verdant hills and shady woods. It was a night like any other, quiet and quiet, too much. I was on my way home after a long day of work on the farm when I heard a strange howl echoing through the woods. That wasn't normal, not in those parts. My heart began to pound as I quickened my pace, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the dark. It was then that, among the trees, I saw a monstrous figure rising in the dim light of the moon. It was a werewolf, with yellow eyes sparking with hunger and sharp teeth gleaming in the darkness. Dread gripped me, but adrenaline propelled me to run like never before. I could feel his presence approaching, his panting almost touching the back of my neck. Instinctively, I ran as if my life depended on it, but the damn being was always one step ahead of me, its panting echoing in my ears. I knew I couldn't beat that creature, but I couldn't give up. The chase continued for endless hours, passing through fields and streams, until I finally reached the city. Each deserted street seemed like a labyrinth with no way out, and the creature was determined to hunt me to the end. Despair turned to panic when I realized that my strength was running out. I was sweating all over my body. Something was making me move forward, an internal strength I didn't even know I had. I saw a light from the church far away, and my heart was already in my mouth. I went in, ran to the altar, knelt down, and asked God for protection. It was then, in that moment of utter despair, that something incredible happened. The creature recoiled before the holy light, howling in pain as it disappeared into the shadows. Over the next few days, the story spread rapidly. No one dared to go out at night, and everyone took cover in the locked houses, hoping the monster wouldn't come back. I also stayed alert, knowing that this encounter could have been just the beginning. The nights were long and filled with nightmares, with the howls of the werewolf echoing in my mind. I've never heard from it again, but I know it's still around, and it's really dangerous. Whenever I hear a dog howl in the woods at night, I am reminded of what happened. I don't enter the forest at night. I decided to leave the city a few days later, trying to be more relaxed. I went to live in a small village many miles away, an isolated community among the mountains. The locals were welcoming, but I soon realized that something was bothering them. At night, there was total silence, as if everyone was afraid to make any noise. One night, as I was getting into bed, I heard the howl again. That familiar, terrifying sound that made me freeze. It couldn't be, I thought. Not here. I got up and went to the window, trying to see something in the darkness. The dogs in the village were agitated, barking incessantly. I grabbed a flashlight and left the house, driven by a mixture of curiosity and fear. As I approached the woods, I saw large, deep footprints in the ground. Footprints that could only belong to that creature. My heart raced, and a chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, I heard a low, guttural growl coming from the trees. The light from the flashlight flickered in my hand as it pointed to the source of the sound. The werewolf stood there, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. I felt an absolute panic, but instead of running, this time I stood still. The werewolf took a few steps towards me, but stopped suddenly. One of the villagers appeared holding a strange object, screaming to scare the animal away. The animal retreated slowly, as if respecting the old man, disappeared into the middle of the dark woods. The old man told me that this werewolf was an ancient curse that had haunted the region for centuries. The only way to ward him off was with the protection of the amulet and the power of ancient words. He handed me the amulet, saying that I should keep it with me at all times. Since then, I have carried the amulet, and whenever I hear the howl, I am reminded of the old man and his words. I know the werewolf is still around, but I want to keep my distance and stay protected and tell everyone to know. I've learned not to underestimate nature and the ancient mysteries that everyone has heard of. Every time there's a full moon, I get goosebumps all over. Everyone in the village seemed to know more than they were willing to tell, and the silence at night was unforgiving. In a conversation with a 75-year-old resident, I found out that many years ago, a man had been unjustly accused of witchcraft and sentenced to death by the community, but many years ago, when this was normal. Before he died, he cast a curse on the village, legends say, and swore he would return as a werewolf to take revenge. I get goosebumps all over just telling him that. That story made my blood run cold. I knew that the werewolf was real and that his thirst for vengeance was not quenched. With the amulet in hand, I began to prepare for an inevitable confrontation. I studied the ancient rituals and local legends, determined to lift the curse once and for all. Finally, on a full moon night, the moment came. The howl echoed through the village, louder and closer than ever. I grabbed the amulet and went to meet the creature, my heart beating like a drum. In the woods, the monstrous figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes shining with uncontrollable fury. I held the amulet tightly and began to recite the ancient words the old man had taught me. The creature hesitated, its fury giving way to an expression of pain and confusion. I continued the ritual, feeling a force beyond me guiding me. The light of the amulet shone brightly, and the werewolf let out one last howl, disappearing in a burst of light. When calm returned to the woods, he knew that the curse had been broken. The village was free, and I had kept the old man's promise. I returned home, exhausted but relieved. knowing that night would be remembered for generations. Since then, the village has prospered, and the fear that once dominated the nights has been replaced by new hope. The story of the werewolf and the curse has become a legend, a warning to never underestimate the dark forces that can lurk in the most unexpected places. And so, dear friend, I end my story. A story of terror, yes, but also of courage and determination. Because in the end, it's these qualities that allow us to face our greatest fears and emerge victorious on the other side.